The gunshot wound in Carter Armstrong's side had stopped bleeding 3 days ago, but the ache remained as constant as his horse's hoofbeats on the dusty trail through Montana Territory in the summer of 1878. He had been riding north from Wyoming after a cattle drive gone wrong, carrying nothing but his bedroll, his Winchester, and a growing certainty that he had finally used up all the second chances a man could expect in one lifetime. The horizon stretched endless and empty before him, sage and dry grass bending under a wind that offered no comfort, when he spotted the figure kneeling beside what looked like a fresh-turned grave on a hillside about 100 yards from the trail. Carter pulled his mare to a stop and squinted against the afternoon sun. The figure was small and dressed in black, and even from this distance he could see the shaking of shoulders that meant weeping. His first instinct was to keep riding. A person's grief was their own business, and he had learned long ago that getting involved in other people's troubles usually meant inviting trouble of your own. But something about the scene struck him as wrong. The grave sat isolated on that hillside with no town in sight, no church, no other markers, just one lonely mound of earth and a woman crying over it. He touched his heels to the mare's flanks and guided her off the trail toward the hill. As he drew closer, he could hear the sound of her crying, raw and broken in a way that spoke of fresh loss. She did not look up as he approached, though she must have heard the horse. Her hands were pressed flat against the disturbed earth, her whole body curved forward as if she wanted to climb into that grave herself. Carter dismounted slowly, his side protesting the movement. He cleared his throat, not wanting to startle her. "Madam, you all right?" She went rigid at the sound of his voice but did not turn around. "Go away." Her voice was hoarse, roughened by crying, but young. Carter hesitated, one hand on his mare's reins. "I do not mean any disrespect, madam, but you are a long way from anywhere. Is someone coming for you?" "No one is coming." She finally lifted her head, though she still did not look at him. Her profile showed a young woman, maybe 22 or 23, with dark hair pulled back in a braid that had come half undone. Dirt streaked her face, mixed with the tracks of tears. "There is no one left to come." Carter glanced at the grave marker, a simple wooden cross with no name carved into it. The wood looked fresh, hastily made. "I am sorry for your loss. Was this a husband? Family?" She made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "This is an empty grave. There is no body here, just dirt and lies." That brought Carter up short. He had seen many strange things in his 32 years, but a woman weeping over an empty grave was a new one. He moved closer, ignoring the warning pain in his side. "I do not understand, madam." She finally turned to look at him, and he found himself staring into eyes so full of pain and anger that it felt like looking into a wildfire. Her face was pretty despite the dirt and tears, with strong features and a mouth set in a hard line. "My sister. They told me she died of fever 3 months ago. They said she was buried here, but I dug down this morning and there is nothing here, no coffin, no body, nothing." Carter felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Who told you she was buried here?" "The people who were supposed to be taking care of her." The woman pushed herself to her feet, swaying slightly. Carter reached out instinctively to steady her, and she did not pull away. Up close, he could see how thin she was, how exhaustion had carved dark circles under her eyes. "I am Olivia Watson. My sister Ruth was 12 years old when I left her at the Mercy Home for Children in Willits, Montana Territory, 16 miles east of here. I have been working in Helena for 2 years to save enough money to buy us a place of our own. I wrote to Ruth every week. Then the letters stopped coming, and when I finally made it here to check on her, they told me she had died and been buried out here on this hillside." "But you do not believe them," Carter said quietly. I know they lied. Olivia pulled away from him and gestured at the empty grave. I spent all of last night digging. My hands are raw, my back is screaming, but I had to know, and now I do. She is not dead, she is somewhere else. They did something with her. Carter looked at the grave, then at the woman, then back at the grave. Everything about this situation screamed danger and complications. The smart thing would be to tip his hat, offer his condolences, and ride on. But he had spent the last 3 days thinking about all the times in his life when he had chosen the smart thing over the right thing, and where that had gotten him. Alone and half dead on a trail to nowhere. "My name is Carter Armstrong," he said. "And if someone has taken your sister, then we need to find her." Olivia's eyes widened. "Why would you help me? You do not know me." "No, madam, I do not. But I know what it is to lose people, and I know what it looks like when someone is telling the truth." He gestured at the empty grave. "That right there is the truth. Now, when was the last time you ate something?" She blinked at the sudden change of subject. "I do not remember. Yesterday morning, maybe." Carter nodded and walked back to his horse, pulling his canteen and the wrapped bundle of hardtack and jerky from his saddlebag. "Sit down before you fall down. You cannot find your sister if you collapse from hunger." Olivia looked like she wanted to argue, but her body betrayed her. She sank down onto the grass beside the grave, accepting the canteen when he offered it. She drank deeply, then took the food he handed her. For a few minutes they sat in silence while she ate, and Carter studied the surrounding area. The hillside overlooked open grassland with mountains visible in the distance. Willits would be to the east, a small town that had sprung up near the railroad line. He had passed through it once, years ago, and remembered it as the kind of place where people minded their own business, which could be good or bad depending on what kind of business was being conducted. "Tell me about this Mercy home," he said when Olivia had finished eating. "Who runs it?" "A man named Reverend Silas Thorne and his wife Prudence." Olivia wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, a gesture that spoke of exhaustion and desperation. "They opened it 5 years ago to take in orphans and children whose families could not care for them. I thought I was doing the right thing, leaving Ruth there. I was only 21, working as a seamstress, barely making enough to feed myself. The Reverend said Ruth would be educated, clothed, fed. He said she would be safe. And you believed him." "I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him." Olivia's voice broke. "My parents died of cholera when I was 19 and Ruth was 10. I had no other family, no money, no prospects. What else could I do?" Carter had no answer to that. He had seen too much of the world to judge anyone for making hard choices in impossible situations. "So you went to Helena to work?" "For 2 years. I worked at a boarding house. Sewing, cleaning, cooking, whatever they needed. The owner was kind. She paid me fairly. I saved every penny I could spare." Olivia pulled a small cloth bag from her pocket, the kind women used for needlework supplies. "I have $73. I thought it would be enough to rent a small house, take Ruth in, maybe start a seamstress business, but I waited too long." "You did not wait too long," Carter said firmly. 2 years is not that long to save money for a new life, and your sister is not dead. That means there is still time." Olivia met his eyes, and he saw a spark of something fierce and determined under the grief. "You really think we can find her?" "I think we can try." Carter got to his feet, offering her his hand. "But we cannot do it from out here. We need to go into Willits and ask questions. Someone in that town knows something. Small places like that, people always know more than they let on." Olivia took his hand and let him pull her up. "The Reverend will deny everything. Then we will talk to other people, shopkeepers, neighbors, anyone who might have seen something or heard something." Carter studied her face. "Do you have a place to stay, money for a hotel?" I have been staying at a boarding house at the edge of town. The landlady thinks I am just visiting to pay respects at my sister's grave." Olivia looked down at herself, at the dirt-covered black dress and her raw, bleeding hands. "I cannot go back looking like this. She will ask questions." Carter considered this. "My horse can carry us both into town. There is a creek about a mile south of here where you can wash up. Then we will get you back to your boarding house before dark. Tomorrow morning we start asking questions. Why are you doing this?" Olivia asked again, and this time there was something almost pleading in her voice, as if she desperately needed to believe his motives were genuine. Carter looked at the empty grave, then at the mountains in the distance, then finally at the woman standing before him with dirt on her face and fire in her eyes. "Because I have spent a long time doing nothing that matters. Maybe it is time I changed that." They rode together to the creek, Olivia sitting in front of Carter in the saddle. He tried not to notice how she fit against him, how her hair smelled like lavender despite everything she had been through. It had been a long time since he had been close to a woman, and even longer since he had felt the protective instinct that surged through him now. She was not his responsibility. He had only met her an hour ago. But something about her determination, her refusal to accept the easy lie of that empty grave, called to something deep inside him that he had thought dead. At the creek, he gave her privacy to wash while he tended to his horse and scouted the area. The sun was dropping toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Montana territory in summer was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way that matched the life people lived here. It took strength to survive in this country, and Olivia Watson clearly had strength to spare. When she emerged from the trees by the creek, she had cleaned her face and hands and done her best to repair her braid. The black dress was still dirty, but she looked more composed, less like a woman on the edge of breaking. She met his eyes steadily. "Thank you," she said simply. "No need for thanks yet," Carter replied. "We have not found her, but you are trying. That is more than anyone else has done." They rode into Willits as the sun set, entering a town of perhaps 300 people clustered along the railroad line. The main street boasted a general store, a saloon, a bank, a church, and a handful of other businesses. Carter left Olivia at her boarding house, a neat white building run by a widow named Mrs. Callahan, promising to meet her at the general store at 9 the next morning. He found a room for himself above the saloon, paying 2 bits for a bed and a basin of water. As he lay in the narrow cot that night, his side aching and his mind churning, he wondered what the hell he was getting himself into. He had come north to start over, to leave behind the mistakes and regrets that dogged him in Wyoming. Getting involved in whatever was happening with missing children at the Mercy home was exactly the kind of trouble he should avoid. But when he closed his eyes, he saw Olivia's face as she knelt by that empty grave, and he knew he could not ride away. Not this time. The next morning dawned clear and warm. Carter met Olivia outside the general store as planned, finding her in a clean blue dress with her hair neatly braided. She looked younger in daylight and more vulnerable despite the determined set of her jaw. "I have been thinking," she said without preamble. "We should start by talking to the doctor. If Ruth was supposedly sick with fever, he would have been called to treat her. It was a good plan." They found the doctor's office 2 blocks from the main street, a small building with a faded sign reading Dr. Benjamin Cole, physician. The doctor himself was a man in his 50s with kind eyes and tired shoulders. He listened as Olivia explained who she was and why she had come. "I remember your sister," Dr. Cole said slowly. "Ruth Watson, sweet girl, always polite, but I am afraid I have to tell you the same thing the Reverend did. She died of scarlet fever in April." "Did you see her body?" Olivia asked, her voice tight. Dr. Cole frowned. I saw her during her illness, yes. I visited the Mercy home several times to check on her and two other children who were also sick. But did you see her body after she died? Olivia pressed. Were you called to confirm the death? The doctor's frown deepened. Now that you mention it, no. The Reverend sent word that she had passed during the night. He said it would be best not to disturb the body, given the contagious nature of the disease. The funeral was held quickly, within a day, to prevent the spread of infection. Carter leaned forward. And that did not strike you as unusual, Doctor? In cases of highly contagious disease, quick burial is recommended, Dr. Cole said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. I thought nothing of it at the time. Did the other children die? Olivia asked. The other two who were sick. One recovered. The other, a boy named Timothy, also died. Dr. Cole stood and moved to a cabinet, pulling out a ledger. He flipped through pages, his frown growing. That is strange. I have no record of issuing death certificates for either Ruth or Timothy. I always issue certificates. It is required by law. Carter and Olivia exchanged glances. Where would those children be buried? Carter asked. The Reverend said he had purchased a plot on the hillside west of town for any children from the home who passed away. Dr. Cole looked troubled now. Miss Watson, what is this about? Has something happened? Olivia's hands were shaking. I dug up my sister's grave yesterday, Doctor. There was no body, just empty earth. The color drained from Dr. Cole's face. He sank back into his chair. My God, are you certain? I am absolutely certain. Olivia's voice was steady despite the shaking of her hands. Someone lied about Ruth's death. And if they lied about her death, what really happened to her? Dr. Cole looked between them. I do not know, but I intend to find out. This is a serious matter. If Reverend Thorne has been falsifying deaths, if something has happened to those children, the marshal needs to be informed. Where is the marshal? Carter asked. Helena. We do not have a lawman stationed here in Willits. We are too small. Doctor. Cole stood again, his professional demeanor cracking to show genuine distress. But I can ride to Helena today and bring him back. It will take 2 days round trip. 2 days might be too long, Olivia said. If the Reverend knows I have been asking questions, he might run, or worse. Carter considered their options. Is there anyone else at the Mercy home besides the Reverend and his wife? Other staff? They have a woman who helps with cooking and cleaning, Martha something, and there are usually about 15 children in residence. Dr. Cole shook his head. I cannot believe this. I have known Silas Thorne for 5 years. He is a pillar of the community. Pillars of the community can have dark secrets, Carter said grimly. Doctor, you should still ride for the marshal. In the meantime, Miss Watson and I will see what else we can learn. After leaving the doctor's office, Carter and Olivia walked through town, trying to decide on their next move. The Mercy home sat on the northern edge of Willits, a large 2-story building that had once been a boarding house. Carter suggested they observe it from a distance first, get a sense of the comings and goings, before confronting the Reverend directly. They positioned themselves across the street, pretending to browse the wares at a small shop that sold household goods. From there, they had a clear view of the home's front entrance. For the first hour, nothing happened. Then a woman emerged, middle-aged and heavyset, carrying a basket. She walked down the street toward the general store. That must be Martha, the cook, Olivia said. Should we follow her? You follow her, Carter said. Try to strike up a conversation, woman to woman, see if she will talk about the home. I'm going to take a walk around the building, see if there is a way to look inside without being noticed. Olivia nodded and set off after the cook. Carter waited until she was safely down the street, then circled around to the back of the Mercy home. The property included a yard where laundry hung on lines, and a vegetable garden showed signs of careful tending. Through a window on the first floor, he could see what looked like a classroom or common room. Several children sat at a long table, working on what might have been schoolwork. They ranged in age from perhaps 6 to 14, and they all looked healthy and normal enough. But something felt wrong. Carter could not put his finger on it at first, and then he realized what it was. The children were too quiet, too still. There was none of the rowdiness or energy he would expect from a group of young people. They moved and worked with the careful precision of people who had learned that making noise or drawing attention would result in punishment. He was about to move to another window when a man appeared in the room. Tall and thin with graying hair and the black coat of a minister, he had to be Reverend Thorne. The man said something Carter could not hear, and the children immediately stood and filed out of the room in perfect silence. The Reverend watched them go, and even from outside, Carter could see the satisfied smile on his face. A chill ran down Carter's spine. He had seen that look before on the faces of men who enjoyed control, who took pleasure in the fear of others. Whatever was happening in the Mercy home, it was nothing good. He made his way back to the main street and found Olivia waiting near the general store, her face pale. "Did you talk to the cook?" he asked. "Yes, we should go somewhere private." Olivia glanced around nervously. "I do not want anyone to overhear this." They walked to the edge of town where the buildings gave way to open land. When they were alone, Olivia turned to him with tears in her eyes. "Martha has been working at the home for 3 years. She is afraid of Reverend Thorne. I could see it in her face. But she was willing to talk, especially when I told her I was Ruth's sister." Olivia took a shaky breath. "She says the Reverend runs the place like a prison. The children are punished for the smallest infractions. They are underfed. They are worked from dawn until dusk. And sometimes children disappear." Carter felt his jaw tighten. "Disappear how?" "Martha says the Reverend tells everyone they have been adopted by families moving west or that they died of illness. But she has never seen any adoption papers. She has never seen any bodies. The children are just there one day and gone the next." Olivia was shaking now. She mentioned Ruth specifically. She said Ruth was a bright girl, a sweet girl who did her best to follow all the rules. And then one night in April, the Reverend took Ruth out of her room. "Martha heard her crying, heard her calling for me. The next morning, Ruth was gone, and the Reverend announced she had died of fever." "Did Martha see what happened to her, where Thorne took her?" "No, but she said something else." Olivia met his eyes. "She said a man comes to the home sometimes late at night. A well-dressed man in a fine carriage. He meets with the Reverend in private, and sometimes after he leaves, a child goes missing. Martha thinks the Reverend is selling the children." The words hung in the air between them, ugly and horrifying. Carter had heard rumors of such things happening in the territories, children taken from orphanages and homes and sold to work in mines or brothels or worse. But hearing it confirmed, knowing that Olivia's sister might have been taken that way, filled him with a rage so pure and fierce he had to physically stop himself from marching back to the Mercy home and dragging the Reverend out by his collar. "Did Martha know who the man was?" he asked, forcing his voice to stay level. "She said he is from Helena, a wealthy man, someone with connections. She heard the Reverend call him Mr. Patterson." Olivia wiped her eyes. "Carter, if Ruth was sold, she could be anywhere. We might never find her." "We will find her," Carter said with more confidence than he felt. "Dr. Cole is riding to Helena for the marshal. When he gets there, we will give him the name Patterson and let the law handle this properly. That could take days, weeks." Olivia's voice rose. "Ruth could be suffering right now. She could be terrified, thinking no one is coming for her, thinking I abandoned her. Carter took her shoulders gently, making her look at him. Listen to me. I know you want to find her right now. I know you want to tear that place apart and make that reverend tell you where she is. But if we go in there without proof, without the law behind us, the reverend will deny everything. He will hide whatever evidence might exist. We will lose our chance to save not just Ruth, but all the other children he has sold. Olivia closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. I feel so helpless. You are not helpless. You found out the truth about that grave. You got Martha to talk. You are doing everything right. Carter realized his hands were still on her shoulders and made himself let go, though part of him did not want to. We will find your sister. I promise you that. It was a foolish promise to make, the kind of promise that could break a person if they failed to keep it. But looking at Olivia's face, seeing the desperate hope in her eyes, Carter knew he would do whatever it took to make it true. They spent the rest of that day, and the next gathering what information they could without alerting the reverend to their suspicions. Carter talked to the owner of the general store, a talkative man who confirmed that Reverend Thorne purchased very little food for the home despite housing 15 children. Olivia spoke with a woman whose daughter had briefly stayed at the home before being reclaimed by a relative. The woman said her daughter had nightmares about the place, about being locked in dark rooms and going to bed hungry. By the evening of the second day, when Dr. Cole returned from Helena with Marshal Andrew Porter, they had built a damning picture of life at the Mercy home. The marshal, a weathered man in his 40s with a steel-gray mustache, listened to everything they had to say. Then he organized a plan. We will search the home tonight, Marshal Porter said. Dr. Cole has given me reason to believe children may be in danger. That is sufficient cause to enter the property without warning. I have deputized 2 men from Helena to assist me. You too, he nodded at Carter and Olivia, will stay outside unless I call for you. Is that understood? Marshal, I am coming with you, Olivia said firmly. If Ruth has left any belongings, any clue to where she might have gone, I am the only one who would recognize them. The marshal looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Olivia's face must have convinced him. All right. But you stay behind me at all times, and if I tell you to leave, you leave. Agreed. Agreed. They approached the Mercy home just after full dark. The building was lit by lamplight in a few windows, and smoke rose from the chimney. Marshal Porter knocked hard on the front door. After a moment, it opened to reveal Reverend Thorne, his expression shifting from surprise to wariness as he took in the marshal's badge. Marshal Porter, what brings you to Willits? I have questions about children under your care, Reverend. May we come in? Of course, but I do not understand. What kind of questions? Thorne stepped aside to let them enter, and his eyes fell on Olivia. Recognition flickered across his face. Miss Watson, I did not expect to see you again. I imagine you did not, Olivia said coldly. They stood in a narrow hallway with doors leading off on both sides. From somewhere upstairs came the faint sound of children's voices, quickly hushed. The Reverend led them into a small office lined with ledgers and religious texts. His wife, a thin woman with a pinched face, appeared in the doorway. Silas, what is happening? The marshal has some questions, Prudence. Nothing to worry about. But the Reverend's voice was tight, and his hands gripped the edge of his desk too hard. Marshal Porter did not waste time. I have reason to believe you have been falsifying the deaths of children in your care. I have reason to believe you have been selling those children to third parties for purposes of exploitation. I am here to search this building and examine your records. The color drained from Thorne's face. That is absurd. Who has been telling you such lies? Multiple sources. Doctor Cole confirms he has no record of issuing death certificates for children you claim died in your care. Miss Watson has verified that her sister's grave is empty. The marshal moved toward the desk. I will see your ledgers, Reverend. Now. You have no right to come in here and make accusations based on the word of a hysterical woman who cannot accept her sister's death. Thorne's voice rose. This is a house of God. I have done nothing but care for unwanted children. Then you have nothing to hide. Marshal Porter gestured to one of his deputies. Start searching upstairs. Check every room. What followed was a tense hour of searching and questioning. The children were gathered in the main room, frightened and confused. Olivia moved among them, asking gentle questions, looking for anyone who might have known Ruth. A girl of about 10, thin as a rail with haunted eyes, finally spoke up. I knew Ruth. She was nice to me when I first came here. The girl's voice was barely a whisper. I saw when the Reverend took her. Everyone in the room went still. Marshal Porter crouched down to the girl's level. What is your name, sweetheart? Lily. Lily, can you tell me what you saw? The Reverend came late at night. He took Ruth out of our room. She was crying. She did not want to go. Lily's eyes filled with tears. He said if I told anyone, he would do the same to me. He said I would disappear and no one would care. That is a lie told by a disturbed child, Thorne sputtered. She has been troubled since she arrived here. She invents stories for attention. But other children were speaking up now, emboldened by Lily's courage. A boy of 12 said he had seen a man in a fine carriage take away his friend. A girl of 8 said the Reverend punished anyone who asked about the missing children. One by one, the stories poured out, painting a picture of systematic abuse and trafficking. In the Reverend's office, the deputies found what they were looking for. Hidden in a false bottom of a drawer were ledgers that told the true story. Children's names, dates, and beside them, amounts of money. Ruth Watson's name was there, along with a notation. Delivered to J. Patterson, Helena, purpose, domestic service, payment received, $150. Olivia made a sound like a wounded animal when she saw her sister's name. Carter caught her as her knees buckled, holding her steady as the marshal arrested Reverend Thorne and his wife. They protested loudly, claiming the ledgers were forgeries, that this was all a misunderstanding, but their protests died when Marshal Porter informed them that he would be traveling to Helena in the morning to arrest J. Patterson as well. You will both face trial for kidnapping, human trafficking, and fraud, the marshal said grimly. If I have my way, you will hang. After the Reverend and his wife were taken away in shackles, the remaining work began. The children needed to be placed somewhere safe while authorities contacted what family they might have. The town's church agreed to house them temporarily, and several local families stepped forward to help. Through it all, Olivia remained focused on one thing. We have to go to Helena, she said to Carter. We have to find Patterson before the marshal arrests him. He might be willing to tell us where Ruth is if we get to him first. It was dangerous reasoning, Carter knew. They should let the law handle it. But he also knew that sometimes the law moved too slowly for desperate situations. If Patterson heard the marshal was coming for him, he might destroy evidence or move the children he had purchased. They might never find Ruth. We leave at first light, Carter said. But Olivia, you need to prepare yourself. Your sister has been gone for 3 months. She might not be the same girl you remember, and there is a chance we might not like what we find. I know, Olivia whispered, but I have to try. I have to bring her home. They rode out of Willits as the sun rose, pushing their horses hard on the road to Helena. The journey normally took a full day, but Carter knew shortcuts through the hills that would save them time. They rode mostly in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. Carter found himself studying Olivia's profile as she rode. noting the determination in her posture. The way she never complained about the pace even though he knew she had to be exhausted. Over the past few days, something had shifted inside him. What had started as a simple desire to help someone in need had deepened into something more complex. He admired Olivia's strength, her refusal to give up on her sister, even when everyone else had accepted the lies. He admired the fierce love that drove her to dig up a grave with her bare hands and confront powerful men who could have crushed her without a second thought. But more than admiration, he felt a connection to her that went beyond their shared purpose. When he looked at her, he did not see a damsel in need of rescue. He saw a partner, someone who matched his determination step for step. And when she looked at him, he saw not judgment for his past mistakes, but acceptance of who he was trying to become. They reached Helena by late afternoon, a bustling city of several thousand people that served as the territorial capital. It was a sharp contrast to the quiet isolation of Willits. The streets were crowded with wagons and horses, and the buildings rose 2 and 3 stories high. Finding one man in all this chaos would be difficult, but Carter had an idea. If Patterson is as wealthy as Martha said, he will have an office or a business in the main district, he said. We start by asking around, see if anyone knows him. Their first stop was a bank. The clerk, a nervous young man with ink-stained fingers, confirmed that yes, there was a J. Patterson who kept accounts there. Mr. Jonathan Patterson. He owns a shipping and freight company. His office is on Lawrence Street, the red brick building near the assayer's office. Armed with this information, they found the building in question. It was an impressive structure, speaking of wealth and success. A sign on the door read, Patterson Freight and Shipping, ESD, 1872. Through the large front window, Carter could see a well-appointed office with leather chairs and polished wood furniture. What do we do? Olivia asked. We cannot just walk in and accuse him. No, but we can watch him, see where he goes, what he does. If he has Ruth or knows where she is, we need to catch him when his guard is down. Carter led her to a restaurant across the street where they could observe the building while pretending to eat dinner. They waited for over an hour. Office workers came and went, but no one matching Patterson's description appeared. Carter was starting to wonder if they had come on a fool's errand when a well-dressed man in his 50s emerged from the building, locking the door behind him. He wore an expensive suit and carried a polished walking stick, and his whole demeanor spoke of money and self-importance. That has to be him, Olivia breathed. They followed Patterson through the streets, keeping a careful distance. He walked with the confidence of a man who owned the world, tipping his hat to ladies and stopping to chat with other businessmen. Eventually, he turned onto a residential street lined with large houses. He climbed the steps of a particularly grand home, a 3-story mansion with a wraparound porch and manicured gardens. Carter and Olivia watched from the shadows as Patterson entered his home. Lights came on in various windows. They could see servants moving about inside. If he has brought children here, he would keep them hidden, Carter said quietly. Probably in the basement or in servants' quarters where visitors would not see them. How do we get in to look? Olivia's voice was tight with frustration. We do not. Not tonight. Tonight we watch and we wait. Tomorrow, when Patterson goes to his office, we will find a way inside to search. It was not the answer Olivia wanted, but it was the smart one. Breaking into a wealthy man's house in the middle of Helena would get them arrested or shot, and neither outcome would help Ruth. They found a small hotel and took separate rooms. Carter lay awake most of the night, listening to the sounds of the city and thinking about what they might find in Patterson's house. He thought about Olivia lying awake in the room next to his, tormented by the knowledge that her sister might be so close and yet still out of reach. He wanted to go to her to offer comfort, but he knew it would not be proper. They barely knew each other, after all. The fact that he felt like he had known her forever was something he kept to himself. The next morning, they positioned themselves to watch Patterson's house. At 9 o'clock, he emerged and walked back toward the business district. As soon as he was out of sight, Carter approached the house. A young maid answered his knock. "Good morning," Carter said, removing his hat and putting on his most charming smile. "I am looking for a girl named Ruth Watson. I was told she might be employed here." The maid's expression shuddered immediately. "We have no one by that name working here." "Are you certain? She is about 12 years old, dark hair, came here from Willits about 3 months ago." Carter kept his tone light and friendly. "Her sister is very worried about her." "I said we have no one by that name." The maid started to close the door, but Olivia stepped forward. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "She is my sister. I am not here to cause trouble. I just need to know she is all right." Something flickered in the maid's eyes, a moment of sympathy or perhaps recognition. She glanced over her shoulder, then stepped out onto the porch, pulling the door closed behind her. "You did not hear this from me," she whispered. "But there are 3 children living in the attic rooms, 2 girls and a boy. They are not allowed to leave the house. Mr. Patterson says they are his wards, that he is providing them with work and shelter, but they work from before dawn until after dark. They are fed scraps. One of the girls is young, maybe 12, with dark hair. She cries at night. I have heard her." Olivia grabbed the maid's hand. "Is her name Ruth? Does she have a scar on her left wrist from a burn she got when she was little?" The maid nodded slowly. "I have seen a scar. It could be a burn." Olivia's knees went weak again. Carter steadied her, his arm around her waist. "Can you get her out?" he asked the maid. "Can you bring her to us? I could lose my position. Mr. Patterson is a powerful man." But the maid looked torn, her conscience clearly warring with her self-interest. "He is also a criminal," Carter said quietly. "The marshal is coming to arrest him today or tomorrow. When that happens, everyone in his household will be questioned. If you help us now, if you help us save these children, that will count in your favor." The maid bit her lip, then nodded. "Come back at 3 o'clock. Mr. Patterson always visits a gentleman's club on Tuesday afternoons. He will be gone for at least 2 hours. I will try to bring the girl to the kitchen door." They spent the intervening hours in an agony of waiting. Olivia could barely eat, could barely sit still. She paced the hotel room, her hands twisting together, her eyes bright with tears she refused to shed. Carter watched her, aching to take away her pain but knowing he could not. All he could do was be present, be steady, be the rock she could lean on if she needed. At 2:45, they positioned themselves near the back of Patterson's house. At precisely 3 o'clock, the kitchen door opened and the maid emerged, leading a thin girl in a plain gray dress. Even from a distance, Carter could see the resemblance to Olivia in the girl's features. "Ruth." Olivia's voice broke on her sister's name. The girl's head snapped up. For a moment she stood frozen, as if unable to believe what she was seeing. Then she broke free of the maid's hand and ran, stumbling in her haste, her face crumpling. "Olivia." They met in the middle of the yard, Olivia catching her sister and pulling her close. Both of them were crying, clinging to each other as if they could never bear to let go. Carter felt his throat tighten at the sight. The maid hurried over to him. "The other 2 children," she said urgently. "What will happen to them? Tell me their names and where they came from," Carter said. "The marshal will see them safely return to their families if they have any." The maid provided the information quickly, glancing nervously at the house. "You need to go now. If Mr. Patterson comes back early and finds them gone, he will know I helped." Carter nodded and touched his hat. "You did the right thing, madam. I hope you know that." He gathered Olivia and Ruth, leading them quickly away from the mansion and back toward the heart of the city. Ruth had not stopped crying, her face buried in Olivia's shoulder. She looked far too thin and there were dark circles under her eyes. But she was alive. She was found. And judging by the fierce way Olivia held her, she would never be lost again. They went straight to the marshal's office. Marshal Porter had arrived in Helena that morning and was in the process of preparing an arrest warrant for Patterson. When he saw Ruth, when he heard her halting, tearful account of being taken from the Mercy home and sold to Patterson, his face went hard as granite. "He made us work all the time," Ruth said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Cleaning and cooking and washing. He said we should be grateful he had given us a home. He said if we tried to run away, he would tell the sheriff we were thieves and we would be hanged." "That man will never hurt you again," Marshal Porter said gently. "I give you my word. He will be arrested before nightfall." True to his word, the marshal and his deputies arrested Jonathan Patterson at his gentleman's club at 5 o'clock that afternoon. They also raided his home and freed the other 2 children Ruth had told them about. Patterson protested his innocence loudly, claiming he had taken the children in out of Christian charity, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. Reverend Thorne, in an attempt to save himself, had already confessed to selling children to Patterson and others over the course of 3 years. The scope of the trafficking ring was larger than anyone had initially suspected. Patterson had connections with similar operations in other territories. Over the next few weeks, as the investigation widened, more than 30 children were recovered from various households and businesses. Some had been forced into hard labor. Others had been destined for far worse fates. Through it all, Olivia remained focused on Ruth. The girl was traumatized, prone to nightmares and fits of weeping. She startled at loud noises and flinched when anyone moved too quickly. But slowly, day by day, she began to heal. Olivia's steady presence, her constant reassurance that Ruth was safe and loved, worked a quiet magic. Carter found himself drawn more and more into their orbit. What had started as helping a stranger had become something much more personal. He cared about Ruth, about her recovery and her future. But more than that, he cared about Olivia. He found excuses to see her every day, bringing her news about the case, offering to help with errands, simply being present when she needed someone to lean on. She never turned him away. If anything, she seemed to seek out his company as much as he sought hers. They would sit together in the evening while Ruth slept, talking about everything and nothing. He learned that Olivia had always wanted to open her own dress shop, that she loved reading but rarely had time for it, that she had a quick wit and a dry sense of humor that emerged once she felt comfortable with someone. She learned that Carter had grown up on a ranch in Texas, that he had lost his family to a Comanche raid when he was 17, that he had drifted for years afterward trying to outrun the grief and guilt. Why guilt? Olivia asked one evening as they sat on the porch of her boarding house. "I was the one who survived," Carter said simply. "My parents, my 2 younger sisters, they all died. I was out checking fence lines. I came back to find the ranch burning and my family gone. For a long time, I thought I should have been there. Maybe I could have saved them. Maybe I should have died with them." Olivia was quiet for a moment, then she reached over and took his hand. "You cannot change what happened, but you can choose what you do with the life you still have. You saved my sister. You saved all those children. That has to count for something." Her hand in his felt right in a way that made Carter's chest ache. He had spent 14 years believing he did not deserve happiness, that he was meant to wander alone as punishment for failing his family. But sitting here with Olivia, feeling the warmth of her hand and seeing the way she looked at him, he began to wonder if maybe he had been wrong. Maybe redemption was not about punishing yourself forever. Maybe it was about choosing to be better, to do better, and accepting that you were worthy of love despite your failures. "Olivia," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something." She turned to face him, her eyes reflecting the lamplight from inside the house. "What is it?" "When I found you at that grave, I was on my way to nowhere. I had no purpose, no direction. I was just drifting, waiting to die or start over or something in between." He took a deep breath. "But these past few weeks with you, helping you find Ruth, I have felt more alive than I have in 14 years. You gave me a reason to care again. And I know we have not known each other long, and I know you have every reason to be focused on your sister right now, but I need you to know that I care about you, more than I probably should." Olivia's breath caught. For a moment she just stared at him, and Carter braced himself for rejection. Then she smiled, a real smile that transformed her whole face. "You should probably know that I care about you too, more than I probably should, given that we met less than a month ago." "A month can be a long time when it is the right person," Carter said. "Yes," Olivia agreed. "It can." They sat there holding hands while the evening deepened around them, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, Carter felt at peace. The trial of Reverend Thorne, his wife, and Jonathan Patterson took place in August of 1878, drawing newspaper reporters from as far away as San Francisco. The evidence was damning, the testimonies of the rescued children heartbreaking. All three defendants were found guilty. Thorne and his wife were sentenced to life in prison. Patterson, whose wealth and connections had initially seemed likely to shield him from the worst consequences, was sentenced to hang after it was revealed that one of the children he had purchased, a boy of 10, had died from injuries sustained while working in a mine Patterson owned. Justice, Carter reflected, was sometimes slow and imperfect, but it did occasionally arrive. With the trial over and Ruth beginning to recover her health and spirit, Olivia turned her attention to building the life she had always dreamed of. She used the money she had saved, along with a generous donation from a women's charity that had taken an interest in her story, to rent a small building in Helena. There she opened a dress shop, offering both ready-made garments and custom sewing. Business was slow at first, but word spread about the quality of her work and the fairness of her prices. Within a few months, she had more orders than she could fill alone. She hired 2 other seamstresses and began teaching Ruth the trade. The girl showed real talent with a needle, and the focused, creative work seemed to help her process her trauma. Carter, meanwhile, found work as a ranch hand on a spread outside Helena. The owner, a man named Joseph Crane, was fair and paid well. Carter discovered that he enjoyed the physical labor, the routine of caring for cattle and mending fences, and all the small tasks that went into keeping a ranch running. It was honest work, the kind that let him sleep soundly at night. Every Sunday, he rode into Helena to attend church with Olivia and Ruth, and afterward, they would have dinner together. These became the highlights of his week, the moments he looked forward to through all the long days of work. He watched Ruth blossom from a frightened, traumatized child into a happier, more confident young lady. He watched Olivia's business grow and thrive, and he felt himself falling more deeply in love with both of them, with the little family they were building, but he hesitated to push for more. Olivia had been through so much. She had lost her parents, nearly lost her sister, faced down criminals and corruption and societal indifference to the suffering of children. She deserved time to build her own life, to stand on her own feet without a man trying to stake a claim on her future. It was Ruth, surprisingly, who forced the issue. One evening in October, as the 3 of them sat in Olivia's small parlor above her shop, the girl looked up from her sewing and said bluntly, Carter, why have not you asked my sister to marry you? Carter nearly choked on his coffee. Olivia turned bright red. Ruth, well, it is obvious you are both in love with each other, Ruth continued, unperturbed. You look at each other like people in the romantic novels Olivia thinks I do not know she reads, and Carter comes to see us every single Sunday without fail. So why has not anyone said anything about it? That is not how these things work, Olivia said, flustered. People need time. There are proprieties. Proprieties are what got us into trouble in the first place, Ruth said firmly. If people had cared less about proprieties and more about what was happening to children at the Mercy home, maybe I would not have been sold like a piece of furniture. I think when you find someone good, someone who loves you and would protect you, you should hold on to them. Out of the mouths of babes, Carter thought, or 13-year-olds who had seen too much of the world's darkness. He set down his coffee cup and turned to face Olivia, who looked like she wanted to disappear into the floorboards. Your sister makes a good point, he said. Carter Armstrong, do not you dare propose to me just because a 13-year-old told you to, Olivia said, but there was a laugh in her voice alongside the embarrassment. I am not proposing because she told me to. Carter took Olivia's hand. I am proposing because I have been wanting to for 2 months and was too afraid you would say no. Olivia's eyes went wide. You want to marry me, more than I have wanted anything in a very long time. Carter's heart was pounding, but he pressed on. I know I am not rich. I am just a ranch hand with a past full of mistakes and a bullet scar in my side that aches when it rains. But I love you, Olivia Watson. I love your strength and your courage and the way you never give up on the people you care about. I love how you built a business from nothing and how you have helped Ruth heal. I love the way you laugh when you think no one is listening and the way you always try to see the best in people even after everything you have been through. And if you will have me, I promise I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you. Olivia's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. Carter, you saved my sister's life. You saved my life in a way by giving me hope when I had none left. You are already worthy of me. The question is whether I am worthy of you. That is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard, Ruth interjected. You are both worthy of each other. Now please say yes so we can start planning the wedding. Olivia laughed through her tears. Yes, she said to Carter. Yes, I will marry you. Carter pulled her close and kissed her, a gentle, tender kiss that promised forever. Ruth made a satisfied sound and went back to her sewing, a smile playing around her lips. They were married in November of 1878 in the same Helena church where they had been attending services. Dr. Cole traveled from Willits to attend, along with Martha, the cook from the Mercy home who had found employment with a kind family in town. Marshall Porter stood as Carter's best man, and Ruth was Olivia's maid of honor. The church was full of friends and well-wishers, people whose lives had been touched by the breaking of the trafficking ring and the courage of one woman who refused to believe a lie. After the wedding, Carter moved into the rooms above the dress shop. It was cramped with 3 of them there, but none of them minded. Joseph Crane, Carter's employer, surprised them with a wedding gift. He was getting too old to run the ranch by himself and needed a partner. If Carter was willing to invest in the business, Crane would make him a junior partner with the understanding that Carter would eventually inherit the whole spread. It was an opportunity beyond anything Carter had imagined. He and Olivia discussed it long into their wedding night, weighing the risks and rewards. In the end, they decided to take the chance. Olivia's dress shop was doing well enough to provide them with some savings. They sold the story of their adventure to a journalist who turned it into a sensationalized book, using the proceeds to buy into the ranch partnership. By the spring of 1879, their lives had settled into a new pattern. Carter worked the ranch with Crane, learning the business side of ranching as well as the physical labor. Olivia continued to run her dress shop, though she hired a manager to handle day-to-day operations so she could spend more time at the ranch. Ruth divided her time between the two places, still learning the seamstress trade but also discovering a love for horses and ranch life. The first real test of their marriage came that summer when Olivia discovered she was pregnant. She was terrified, having lost her own mother and feeling unprepared for motherhood. But Carter was steadfast in his support, and Ruth was thrilled at the prospect of becoming an aunt. The baby, a healthy boy they named Samuel after Carter's father, was born in February of 1880. 2 years later, a daughter named Grace followed, and 3 years after that, twin boys they named Henry and Thomas. Through it all, Ruth remained a central part of their family. She never married, though she had suitors. Instead, she threw herself into social work, advocating for better oversight of orphanages and homes for children. She worked with women's groups to establish legal protections for vulnerable children, and testified before the territorial legislature about the need for reform. Her testimony, combined with the publicity from the trial and the book about Olivia and Carter's story, led to new laws requiring regular inspections of charitable institutions and stricter penalties for human trafficking. Joseph Crane passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1885, leaving the ranch entirely to Carter as promised. By that time, the Armstrong Ranch, as it had been renamed, was one of the most successful operations in Montana Territory. Carter had proven himself a shrewd businessman as well as a skilled rancher. But he never forgot where he had come from or how close he had come to wasting his life in bitterness and regret. Every year on the anniversary of the day he found Olivia weeping over that empty grave, Carter rode out to the hillside where it had all begun. The cross was gone now, removed after the trial, but he knew the exact spot. He would stand there and remember the lost, broken man he had been, and give thanks for the second chance he had been given. On the 20th anniversary, in 1898, Olivia rode out to meet him there. They were both older now, Carter's hair going gray at the temples and Olivia's face showing the lines of a life well lived. But when she took his hand, Carter felt the same jolt of recognition and connection he had felt that first day. "You ever regret it?" Olivia asked quietly. "Everything that came after this day. The struggles and the hard work and the times when we barely had enough money to feed our family." "Not for a single second," Carter said. "You gave me back my life, Olivia. Before I found you, I was just going through the motions, waiting for death. But you reminded me what it meant to live, what it meant to care about something beyond yourself." "I think we saved each other," Olivia said. "I was so lost when you found me, so afraid I would never see Ruth again. You gave me hope when I had none, and you gave me purpose." Carter pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "The best decision I ever made was getting off my horse that day and asking if you were all right." They stood together on that hillside as the sun set over Montana, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. In the distance, they could see their ranch, the house they had built for their growing family, the barns and corrals that represented years of hard work and sacrifice. Smoke rose from the chimney, and they could just make out their children playing in the yard, watched over by Ruth, who at 35 was still an integral part of their lives. It had been 20 years since that desperate day when Olivia had dug up an empty grave with her bare hands, refusing to believe the lie she had been told. 20 years since Carter had been given a chance to be something more than a drifter with no purpose. In those 20 years, they had built something real and lasting. They had created a family, a legacy, a life worth living. Ruth eventually married a lawyer named David Winters in 1901, a kind man who shared her passion for social justice. They moved to Helena, where David opened a practice focused on helping the poor and disenfranchised. Ruth continued her advocacy work, and together, they adopted 3 children whose parents had died or abandoned them. She never forgot what it felt like to be lost and alone, and she dedicated her life to ensuring other children would not suffer as she had. Carter and Olivia's children all grew up strong and healthy. Samuel inherited his father's love of ranching and took over the operation of the Armstrong Ranch when Carter retired in 1905. Grace became a teacher, opening a school for girls in Helena that emphasized both academic learning and practical skills. Henry became a veterinarian, and Thomas followed his Aunt Ruth into law. As Carter and Olivia grew old together, they often reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. If Carter had ridden past that hillside without stopping, if Olivia had accepted the lie about Ruth's death, if either of them had chosen the safe path instead of the hard one, their entire lives would have been different, but they had chosen the hard path, and it had led them to each other. It had led them to a love that sustained them through every trial and tribulation. It had led them to a family that filled their later years with joy and meaning. Carter passed away in the winter of 1912, at the age of 66, surrounded by his children and grandchildren. His last words were to Olivia, spoken so quietly that only she could hear them. "Thank you for saving me." Olivia followed him 3 years later in the spring of 1915. In her final hours, with Ruth holding her hand and her children gathered around her bed, she smiled and whispered, "Tell Carter I am coming. Tell him I never stopped loving him, not for a single day." They were buried side by side on a hillside overlooking the ranch they had built together, under a sky as wide and blue as the day they first met. Their tombstones bore simple inscriptions. Carter's read, "He found a lost girl and saved them both." Olivia's read, "She never stopped believing in love." But the true testament to their lives was not carved in stone. It was in the children and grandchildren who carried on their legacy of compassion and courage. It was in the laws Ruth had helped pass that protected vulnerable children. It was in the ranch that had provided employment and homes for dozens of families over the years. It was in the love story that became legend in Montana, the tale of a cowboy and a woman who found each other at their lowest points and built a life of purpose and meaning. On warm summer evenings, Samuel's children would sit on the porch of the ranch house and listen to their grandmother Ruth tell stories about their grandparents, about how brave Olivia had been, digging up that grave with her bare hands, about how Carter had put his own safety at risk to help a stranger, about how they had fought against injustice and won, not just for Ruth, but for all the children who had been stolen and sold. "Remember," Ruth would tell them, her voice still strong even in her 70s, "love is not just a feeling. It is a choice. It is choosing to help someone even when it is hard. It is choosing to believe in goodness even when the world shows you darkness." Your grandparents understood that. And because they made that choice, all of you are here today. The children would nod solemnly, absorbing the lesson, carrying it forward into their own lives. And in that way, Carter and Olivia lived on, their love transcending death, their story a reminder that even in the hardest times, even in the darkest moments, there is always hope for redemption, for connection, for a second chance at life. The Armstrong Ranch continued to prosper through the 20th century, adapting to changing times, but never losing sight of the values Carter and Olivia had instilled. The dress shop Olivia had started eventually became a chain of stores throughout Montana, managed by Grace's daughters and their children. The Legal Aid Society Ruth and David had founded grew into a statewide organization providing free legal services to those who could not afford them. Every generation added their own chapters to the story, but they all traced back to that day in 1878 when a wounded cowboy found a woman weeping over an empty grave and chose to stop, chose to care, chose to help. And in doing so, saved not just her, but himself, and created a legacy that would touch thousands of lives. It was a testament to the power of love, the importance of choosing compassion over indifference, and the truth that even the smallest act of kindness can change the world. Carter had thought his life was over, that he had nothing left to give. Olivia had thought she had lost everything that mattered. But they found each other at exactly the right moment, and together they proved that it is never too late to start over, to build something beautiful from the ruins of loss and pain. Their love story became part of Montana's history, taught in schools and written about in books. But for their family, it was simply the foundation of everything they were. A reminder that love is not just romance and passion, though Carter and Olivia had shared plenty of both. Love is also perseverance and sacrifice. It is showing up day after day, even when it is hard. It is choosing each other over and over again through all of life's challenges. And in the end, it is the only thing that truly lasts, the only thing that can bridge the gap between life and death, the only thing that makes a life well lived. Carter and Olivia understood that truth, lived it every day of their marriage, and passed it on to everyone they touched. Their story began with an empty grave and a cowboy who cared enough to ask if a stranger was all right. But it ended with a legacy of love that spanned generations and touched countless lives, proving that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with the simplest choice: to stop and help someone in need.